The job came down on a night so humid the air felt chewed up and spit out. I was still nursing burns from the last case, Class 4 corrosive, acid spitter. Took out the left sleeve of my field coat and a solid chunk of my shoulder along with it. The Bureau's med unit patched me up well enough, but I'd barely gotten the bandage off before they flagged another call. Someone explained auditory events in Fairmont Park. No physical injuries reported. No damage. Just whispering. 3 people had called it in. 2 joggers and a kid who snuck out after dark. All described the same thing. Voices in the trees. Low and rhythmic. Too many at once. Never loud, but never fading. One claimed the trees were moving. The others didn't wait around long enough to confirm. Most of these kinds of cases never make it past local bureau screening. Weird sounds in a public space? That's low risk. Maybe a false alarm. At worst, a fragment of a breach caught in runoff magic. But this one had escalated flags. Minor compulsions, sleep disturbances. A retired agent living 2 blocks from the park reported his dreams had started bleeding, and a squirrel bit through its own skull. That was enough to kick it up to me. Keen didn't even preface the call with a briefing, just location, gear suggestion, time frame, and then the comm went dead. I didn't ask for more. Fairmont Park used to be beautiful. Old-growth trees, a slow stream, benches with bronze plaques from before I was born. Now it smelled like a peat swamp and sweat, the kind of scent that clings to your skin long after you leave. The path had cracked. Roots were warping the pavement. Lamplight flickered in patches, and the trees looked too still. I parked the van near the east trailhead, keeping the lights off, and I sat for a minute in the dark. The vehicle was a Bureau standard, unmarked white panel van with just enough rust to look like it belonged in a parking lot behind a gas station. The interior still stank of burnt coffee and mildew. Someone had left a dried-out banana peel on the dash. It had fused with the surface. It felt right at home in the Bureau's finest. My shoulder throbbed under the fresh gauze, stiff from the drive. I dug through the glove compartment until I found half a salve capsule, crushed and melted to the bottom of a paper receipt. I scraped off just enough to smear it under my collar. It hissed when it touched the wound and then settled into a dull buzz under my skin. Outside, the park waited, and I ran my checklist. Flashlight with ward glass in the lens, bone-handled knife, still notched from a Class 3 scrape in Philly, salt sprayer, full and pressurized, a Bureau standard detection charm, and my emergency disc. A disc of old bone strung on a leather cord, engraved with symbols I didn't recognize, and was pretty sure that I wasn't cleared to ask about it. I stepped out into the heat. The air was thick, quiet. No birds, no bugs. Just the faint buzz of a distant power line and the hum of breath I couldn't place. I walked past the first bench and paused. Someone had carved something into the seat, and it wasn't words, just a swirl. A spiral that curved wrong, like it didn't want to end. The trees rustled, soft, like they were shifting position when I wasn't looking. I activated the detection charm at the north bend of the trail, near the stream. It lit up weakly at first, pulsing warm in my hand, and then it screamed, a sharp shriek, audible only to me, like 1,000 tiny mouths gasping at once. I nearly dropped it. And then I heard it. The whispering. Dozens of voices, not chanting, just murmuring, overlapping and endless. They came from the trees, but not from their branches or roots. From inside the trunks. From beneath the bark. I pressed closer, hand on the sprayer. A tree to my left trembled, just slightly, not from the wind. Then the whispers shifted.
You left her. You didn't bury her. You watched her die.
My grip tightened. That was the trick of this kind of infestation. It wasn't trying to scare me, it was trying to talk to me. It learns from the things you wish you hadn't done, the weight you carry when no one else is looking, and then it speaks them back to you. I stepped off the trail into the brush where the trees grew thicker and the light stopped pretending to help. The ground was soft underfoot, each step squelched. Not mud, but pulp. And there, in the clearing, I found the heart. A massive trunk, split open vertically like a wound. Inside, a knot of roots pulsed, fleshy and wet, wrapped in tendrils of fungus and hair. Faces moved beneath the bark, flickering impressions. Not real people, but memories pressed into the grain. It was a whisper nest, grown large, fed by proximity of the city's grief, watered with everything its people didn't say aloud. I raised the sprayer and pulled the trigger. The mist hissed, coating the core. It sizzled on impact, sending up steam and the smell of rot and ozone. The whispers changed pitch, climbing high and then dipped low, swirling into a storm of grief that clawed into my ears.
You took the easy way. You left before the end. You are not forgiven.
My shoulder flared and my teeth clenched, and I sprayed again. The nest shuddered, cracked, and then burst. Silent. No explosion, no final scream. Just a pop of pressure and a wave of air like a lung exhaling its last. The roots shivered, and the bark grayed. The whispering stopped. I walked out of the woods half an hour later, covered in sap and ash in something that might have once been a part of someone's memory. The detection charm had burned itself out, and my coat was torn again. My shoulder bled under the bandage. I sat on the hood of the van and let the cicadas return. Then the comms flicked on. Keen's voice was cold and efficient. Incident concluded, but your profile just spiked. I'm fine, I said, wiping the sap from my jaw. Protocol requires reassignment. Field operations will be team-based going forward. You're being transferred. I stared at the tree line. Keen, I work alone. Not anymore. Compliance is mandatory. And the line cut out. I sat in the dark a moment longer, the engine ticking softly as it cooled, hands still tight on the wheel. Outside, the breeze stirred the leaves, gentle and almost apologetic, but the trees stayed silent. No whispers this time, no voices, nothing clawing at the back of my mind. Just wind and shadows and the echo of something already dead. And so I drove, because I may hate this job, the blood, the lies, the way it chews through people like meat on a hook, but I hate being unemployed even more. You know what's worse than being assigned a team? Meeting the team. I pulled into HQ at 8:57 a.m., still dark, still freezing, still bleeding just a little from the last job. The parking lot was half frozen, strewn with cigarette butts, and bordered on one side by a condemned mall and the other by a 24-hour gym that catered exclusively to bodybuilders and potential cryptids. HQ itself was a squat concrete bunker with no signage, no charm, and exactly one redeeming feature. Nobody ever asked questions when you walked in covered in ichor. The first desk was manned, if that's a word, by Cheryl, a middle management demon who looked like she could dismember a tax auditor with a knitting needle. Her horns were filed into elegant, cruel points. She was working on what looked like a scarf the size of a funeral shroud. "They're in waiting room 3B, she said without looking up. "Don't bleed on the carpet." There's no carpet. There never has been. Room 3B smelled like dry coffee and wet ceiling tile. A folding table squatted under a flickering fluorescent light, beside two ancient plastic chairs and a coffee maker that had, by the look of it, been unplugged since the Cold War. Sitting in one of the chairs was a woman with dark skin, black eyes, and the kind of stillness that makes predators hesitate. She didn't blink when I walked in. She didn't move at all. "Hi," she said. "I'm Mara, your partner." No handshake, no warmth, just the words, clipped and neutral, like she was stating a fact. She didn't look like she needed backup. She looked like she'd already handled the problem and was waiting for me to catch up. The second chair was empty. "Where's the third?" I asked. As if summoned by bad timing and hubris, the door slammed open. A kid stumbled in, 20, maybe 22, with unruly hair, a too-clean agency windbreaker, and a wide-eyed enthusiasm of someone who hadn't been properly traumatized yet. He was chewing a protein bar like it owed him money. "Oh, sorry, I got turned around by the thing in the lobby. Is that thing alive? I turned to Mara. She looked at the kid, and then back to me. This is a joke, I said flatly, and the kid grinned. Keen assigned me, he said proudly. Ren, new blood, first field rotation. I rubbed my temples, already regretting my existence. This job sucked before. Now it had interns. They sent us out before noon. Case file came down from HQ's upper vault, a downtown hospital emergency wing. Reports of patients disappearing from their rooms during overnight stays. No alarms tripped, no camera footage past 1:50 a.m. Just blank screens and empty beds. One consistent detail. Each time it happened, staff reported seeing a man standing outside the building around 2 a.m., ringing a small silver bell. Security tried to approach him once and he vanished mid-step. The file didn't say what kind of entity he was. That was our job. Remove if necessary, it said. In this business, remove had many implications, and necessary usually meant unavoidable. I drove the van. Mara sat in the passenger seat like a statue carved from silence. Ren perched in the back, a notebook in his lap, legs bouncing with too much nervous energy. So, he started, are there, ranks in monster hunting? Do we get badges or code names, or, wait, is it true that some demi-humans can smell lies? Because Mara didn't answer. She hadn't spoken since we left HQ. She was watching the window like it might start speaking in tongues. I cut Ren off. Kid, I said, you ever seen a body with no eyes and too many mouths? He blinked. No? And shut up and pay attention. He shut up. For about 7 minutes. Hospitals at night have a weird hum to them. The light's too white, and the quiet's too loud. Everyone's tired in the bones, and no one really wants to ask questions they can't answer. The night staff met us in the security office and walked us through the footage. Grainy shots of a street corner just outside the ER. All empty until 1:57 a.m., and then a flicker. A figure. Blurred, thin, distorted by lens flare, and then static. It's always static. We set up outside the ER around 1:40 a.m. I sat on the curb, wrapped in my coat, scanning the street. Mara leaned against a lamppost like it belonged to her. Ren held a thermal camera and chewed his lower lip like he was trying to stay brave through sheer dentistry. And then we heard it. A bell chimed. The sound was soft, too soft for the distance, but it cut through the air like a blade. Clear, brittle, sharp. A man came walking down the sidewalk. He wore an old-fashioned charcoal suit with a high collar and a bowler hat perched too neatly atop his bald head. Thin and pale and eerily upright, like he hadn't bent a joint in years. In his right hand, he carried a small silver bell. He stopped 10 feet from us. His head tilted and he looked at me. Not for you, he said. His voice was wrong. Too many echoes. Felt like someone else was speaking through him, but poorly. He rang the bell again with a soft chime, and Ren vanished. No noise, no shimmering of light, no puff of smoke, just gone, like a TV switched off mid-sentence. I took a step forward, but Mara was already in motion. She moved like gravity didn't work the same for her, reached into her coat and pulled out a charm carved from something dark and twisted, bone or maybe something even older. She whispered a word that made my teeth itch and my vision shimmer. Her pupils split sideways like slits in wet paper, and she hissed. The man turned and ran. We chased him down an alley. Concrete walls, overflowing dumpster, puddles that reflected wrong. The bell rang with each step he took, the sound bouncing in ways it shouldn't, folding in on itself. Mara moved ahead of me, her hands weaving sigils in the air. Every line she drew left smoke in its wake, the walls shimmering like they were breathing. Vanished again, just ahead. But in his place was a doorway. Not a normal one. This one pulsed. It looked like an afterimage burned into reality. Jagged edges, frame made of darkness stitched into static. The space behind it shimmered like oil on water. Rift, Mara said. Pocket realm. Roving between real places. This one feeds on grief. And Ren's in there? She nodded once. I groaned and pulled out my emergency charm. I gripped it until it bit into my palm. God, I hate this part. And I stepped through. Inside the rift, the sky bled orange and bruised purple like a sunset caught mid-death. The ground was slick with something that resembled linoleum but shifted underfoot like flesh. Hallways branched off in every direction, curving impossibly, stretching and shrinking like bad dreams. The walls flickered with hospital lighting that clicked every few seconds, each flicker accompanied by a soft murmur behind closed doors. Ren was ahead, suspended in the air above a gurney by an invisible thread that coiled around his arms and legs like a puppeteer's wire. His head lolled, and his mouth twitched. Around him stood dozens of versions of the bell ringer, each slightly different. One had no nose, one was 7 feet tall, one wept black tears that steamed as they hit the floor, and they rang their bells together. Each chime drove spikes of pressure into my skull. Blood began to pour from my ears, my knees hit the floor, I tasted copper. Behind me, Mara stepped into the rift. Her eyes had gone fully black now, her skin pulsing faintly with power. She didn't speak, she roared, something low and ancient that shook the air and fractured the space around us like broken glass. The illusion shattered, the extra men collapsing into the fog. The real bell ringer stood alone, panicked, reaching for his bell. Mara caught it midair and crushed it with a fist that glowed white-hot, and the rift screamed. I ran to Ren, grabbed him hard enough to hurt, yanked him down from the strings that held him. He gasped, coughed, and blinked like someone was waking up underwater. We ran. The world collapsed in behind us, folding inward like a wound trying to close. We spilled out into the alley, breathless and battered. The rift behind us shivered into a thin seam and vanished with a faint pop. The night was quiet. The hospital lights flickered back to their regular hum. Ren sat slumped against the wall, shaking, drenched in sweat, and something foggy steamed from his clothes. What was that? He whispered. Memory eater, probably, I said, panting. Lures people in. Grief makes him easier to take. I saw my brother, Ren said quietly. He died 10 years ago, I thought. He told me it was my fault. Mara knelt beside him, her touch surprisingly gentle on his shoulder. He came back, she said. Not praise and not sympathy, just fact. But Ren nodded like it meant everything. I stood slowly and flexed my bad shoulder, still sore. Always sore. Ren looked up at me. Are all the jobs like this? No, I said. I let that hang for a moment. Some are worse. He didn't laugh. Smart kid. Keen's message came through as we walked back into HQ. Good work. Patient disappearances ceased. Entity neutralized. Debrief uploaded. Team efficiency rating 72%. Ren blinked. Is that good? It's passing, I said. Later, I stood out back behind the bunker, smoking something herbal the agency swears isn't addictive. Mara joined me without a word. The cold didn't seem to touch her. We stared up at the sky, clear for once, stars like pinpricks in old fabric. He didn't flinch when the realm twisted, she said. I was too tired to flinch, and she nodded, approving. Good. We stood there for a while, quiet, and then I asked, Hey, Mara, what are you? She turned just enough to let me see the corner of her smile, not wide, but real. Still figuring it out. Fair enough. It started with a string of livestock deaths just outside the city perimeter. Brutal ones. Throats torn, bodies drained, bones cracked in ways that didn't line up with any known predator profile. The local bureau vet flagged it after a neighbor went out looking for a missing goat and came back babbling about, quote, a thing with hooves and hands. Then 2 people went missing, farmhands from an old family property that doubled as a private butcher shop. The bureau tagged the location isolated high risk and passed it off to us before oversight could tie it up in paperwork. Just an animal, probably, Keen had said. Go check it out. That was a lie. Keen doesn't assign me to cows that bite back. The drive took us east, where the trees get taller and the sky feels heavier. Like it's been watching too long and finally leaned in. We didn't talk much. Ren sat in the back, checking his gear with exaggerated focus. Mara rode up front, arms crossed and face still unreadable. She always got quiet before something went bad. The butcher shop was tagged on bureau maps as Morrow Farm, but it wasn't a farm anymore, just a leaning 2-story farmhouse surrounded by dry fields and a few rust-stained outbuildings. No lights, no smoke, no sound. The front porch was crooked, boards grayed by age and weather, a closed sign hanging from one chain. A faint metallic stink hung in the air, copper, sweat, and something wetter. Ren stepped out and squinted at the place. This is where jerky comes from? If you're lucky, I muttered, checking the gauge on my sprayer. Stay close. The inside of the house was darker than it should have been. No windows broken, no storm shutters drawn, just dark like the air was thicker than the light could push through. The entryway opened into a showroom, clean, cold, and clinical. Glass cases stood along the walls, most of them empty except for one that held a few slabs of meat, dark and old. Labels sat beside them, but the ink had bled. Mara ran her fingers along the countertop and came back with a smear of black grease. This wasn't abandoned, she said. Someone's been working here. Ren pointed to a blood trail that led from the back of the room, through the swinging metal door. Guessing that's not part of decor? He said as we followed the trail. The back room was colder. Hooks hung from the ceiling, some empty, others swaying faintly as if they'd been disturbed only moments ago. The walls were lined with tools, cleavers, bone saws, gut knives. Some new, some old enough to still have wooden handles stained from before plastic was a thing. We heard it before we saw it. A wet, dragging scrape, not rhythmic but staggered, like it was favoring a leg. And then a grunt, low and animalistic. It was hungry. We moved as one, stepping into the storage hall behind the processing room, and there it was. It stood maybe 8 feet tall, hunched beneath the rafters, back bristling with coarse black hair. Its limbs were too long, joints thick and knuckled like tree roots. The head was boar-like, tusks curling forward, but the mouth didn't match. It was too wide and the lips were peeled back over rows of human-shaped teeth. Its eyes were small and red, deep-set behind matted fur and a brow like an old scar. It was chewing something, and when it saw us, it didn't charge, but instead it grinned. Ren raised his weapon. Mara hissed through her teeth. I'd seen things like this before, but never up close, never full grown. I threw the first ward, and it screeched, but not in pain, but in glee, and it lunged. The fight was short, terrible. Mara went left, her blade singing through the air, carving sigils mid-swing. Ren got one shot off before it batted him into a meat rack. I dove under its swing and jammed the salt sprayer into its ribs, pulling the trigger until my hand cramped. It bucked, slammed me into the floor, and nearly took my leg with one kick. I rolled, vision spinning, as Mara climbed onto its back and stabbed her blade through its shoulder. It screamed, and the sound cracked my eardrum. The creature twisted, grabbed her mid-strike, and threw her hard against the wall. She crumpled and didn't move. I got up, sprayer broken, knife gone, just me and it. And it charged. I reached for the emergency charm. The bone disc flared hot in my palm. I whispered the activation words through bloody teeth. When it hit me, the charm hit back. Light, raw and searing, exploded outward, carving through the fur and muscle. The creature howled and dropped, body twitching, steam pouring from the wound. It wasn't dead, but it was close. Mara staggered upright, dragging herself to the table. She grabbed the cleaver. One clean swing. Then it was over. We sat on the blood-slicked floor, breathing hard, backs against the wall while the thing twitched in the corner. Ren limped over, bruised and bleeding from the scalp. "Was that normal?" he asked, voice thin. "No," I said. "But it's real." Mara wiped the cleaver clean but didn't say anything. We stayed like that for a while, listening to the wind scrape the side of the house, surrounded by meat hooks, broken tiles, and a silence that felt earned. Back at HQ, Keen didn't even flinch. "Predatory anomaly. Handled. Debris filed," he said without looking up. Ren went to medical. Mara walked past me without a word, and me? I cleaned the charm and filed the case report. Next call came in clean. No code red, no dead bodies, no screaming alerts. Just a flagged anomaly report routed through civilian channels and pushed to our inbox like a polite request to fix a flickering streetlight. That's how the worst ones always start. An upscale gallery in the warehouse district had quietly closed off one of the exhibits after 3 patrons fainted within minutes of entering the same room. No known hexes, no blood, no obvious magic. But all 3 said the same thing, later when they could talk. They made me remember something I never lived. No trauma, no violence, just something wrong. Keen handed it to us like it was an afterthought. "Low threat, investigate and log. Don't escalate unless absolutely necessary." The kind of job to make us feel useful without costing much. The kind they throw at teams that needed to get back on rhythm. He wasn't subtle. It was raining when we left HQ. Always is when I get fresh stitches. The gallery didn't have a name. Just a white front and minimalist signage. Clean, expensive, unbranded. The kind of place that sells silence as prestige. Inside, everything has white on white. Exposed beams, soft lighting, blank walls, and pensive jazz. People whispered more than they spoke. Most of the crowd sipped wine and pretended to not look nervous. The curator met us at the entrance. Sharp suit, nervous hands, too much cologne. His badge identified him as civilian liaison adjacent. Probably some ex-bureau intern trying to pivot into the private sector. "We shut down the room 2 days ago," he said. "Since then, no further incidents, but we're worried about exposure. Something's wrong in there." "Where did the piece come from?" Mara asked, already scanning the space. "Private estate sale. No artist name. No provenance. Just showed up with a crate of mixed modernist pieces. It wasn't catalogued until it was hung." "Did anyone notice anything before the incidents?" Ren added. "Like any weird sensations? Lights flickering? Whispers?" The curator shook his head and then hesitated. "Some guests said the colors felt too deep, whatever that means." We looked at each other. And then we looked at the door to the sealed exhibit. The room was small. 4 white walls, dimmed lighting, a single pedestal in the center with a wide square frame turned backward so the contents faced the wall. There were no other works, no labels, just a handwritten sign taped to the entrance. "Exhibit closed for maintenance. Do not touch." We geared up, but not for combat. This was investigative protocol. Mirrored lenses, low-tier charm work, memory buffers etched into the ruins. No high-grade spells, nothing loud, just tools for walking gently through whatever residue was stuck in the air. Mara led the scan. She paced the room twice, fingers splayed, eyes half-lidded like she was listening with something behind her eyes. After a minute, she exhaled. "It's not a curse," she said. "It's emotional bleed." Residual? I asked. She shook her head. Fresh, still active, but not hostile. It's searching. Ren frowned. Searching for what? We didn't answer, because we didn't know. We took turns examining the frame. It was simple. Wooden, untreated, no marks or glyphs. The art inside was a series of layered transparencies, half-finished brushwork over spiraling lacquer. The shape changed depending on where you stood. From one side, it looked like a face. From another, a hallway. From straight on, nothing at all. But that wasn't what stuck. What stuck was the sensation, a soft, aching pull in the back of your head, like a memory surfacing. Not one you'd lost, one that was never yours to begin with. Ren leaned in closer than we advised, and after 30 seconds he stepped back, quietly sat on the floor, and rubbed his temples. Kid, you okay? I asked. He nodded. I just remembered what it felt like to be my mom when I was born. We both looked at him. I know how that sounds, he muttered. I'm serious. I felt her bones, her lungs, her panic, and then it stopped. Mara sat beside him, not touching, just grounding his presence. Projection, she said softly. The object's harvesting impressions, pulling fragments from whoever gets too close. That's why the others passed out. It overloaded their sense of self. So, I asked, are we dealing with a trap? No, she said. It's not predatory. She tilted her head, watching the painting not with fear, but with something like curiosity. I think it's lonely, she said. We stayed longer than planned. Not because of danger, but because of something else. It felt quiet in that room. Not just silence, but peaceful. There was a stillness to it, like being underwater without drowning. Like being remembered by something that didn't want to hurt you, just wanted to be known. Mara traced the frame with one gloved finger. Whatever this is, someone built it. This kind of thing doesn't happen by accident. Ren scanned over the artwork from a farther than necessary distance. After a few moments, he pointed to a strange marking on the back corner of the frame, a hollowed-out sun. Mara leaned in close to the mark, before sighing and turning to face us. I've seen this a few times before on abnormalities. I'm not sure what it means, but it's becoming a pattern. Maybe an artist's brand? Ren cautiously offered. Or a warning, Mara added. I think someone's experimenting, seeing what sticks, what moves, what makes someone pause instead of scream. We filed our field report that night. Non-lethal anomalous object, active emotional field, non-corrosive, non-sentient, possibly pre-sentient. Requested full memory forensics and emotional resonance analysis by oversight. We didn't seal the project, we didn't destroy it, we left it where it was, contained to be observed and respected. Back in the van, Ren broke the silence first. I think this was good. We looked at him. I mean, not in a happy way, just not all this stuff wants to kill us, you know? That has to count for something, right? Mara nodded. It does, I said. He nodded and then paused. Still not sleeping tonight, though. No one is, I muttered. And we drove home through the rain. 3 tired people and 1 memory we couldn't quite call ours. Dead people usually stay put. A rule you think about much, because it's the one constant. Even in our line of work, where doors scream and shadows bite, corpses generally stay where you leave them. Silent, settled, and done. But lately, bodies have been going missing. And not from morgues, not from civilian graves. That would have made sense. I mean, sort of. These were bureau dead. Black site internments. Containment disposal lots. hidden hunter graves, buried under glyphs and wards and forget-me spells. Graves for people like us. No one talks about it, not out loud. The whispers say clerical error, misplaced file, malfunctioning camera, a mistake, nothing more. But when Rebecca Sten went missing, a level 5 operative, confirmed banisher, and one of the only humans to survive direct exposure to a phage lord, they finally decided to let someone look into it. Guess who they picked? The graveyard was Bureau-owned, an unmarked plot at the edge of the city, behind a veil of forgetfulness. It wasn't on any map, just rows of grass and fog and enchantment strong enough to keep most monsters from sniffing too close. We arrived before sunrise. The air was thick enough to chew, mist rolling across the ground like it had purpose. Ames was already waiting, surgical scrubs under a bureau-issued trench, clipboard in hand, expression as warm as a dissected frog. "They hit 5 graves," she said without looking up. "All hunters. Magically compromised prior to death. No signs of forced entry. We only caught it because one of the casket wards tripped a silent alarm." Mara crouched beside the open graves. Her fingers hovered just above the soil, twitching in response to something only she could feel. "Clean job," she said. "Very clean. Magic was used, but not cast here." "That mean portals?" Ren asked, standing back from the disturbed earth. "No," she replied. "It means someone brought pre-charged bones, channeled through a proxy. Everything activated on site." She looked up at me. "Ritual class." That was bad. The bodies weren't taken whole. No complete corpses, just parts, selective, precise. Ribs, vertebrae, teeth, fragments of a skull. Tissue that still carried trace echoes of magic, even if burnt out. "Someone's harvesting used magic?" Ren asked, face pale. "Yeah," I said. "Think of it like reusing cooking oil. It's tainted and weak, not worth much unless they're trying to extract what's left." Ames finished. "Boil it down, reforge it." Mara straightened. "Or replicate it." The word stuck to the back of my throat like ash. Replication meant understanding, understanding meant weaponization, and that meant war. The magical trace was faint, but trackable. Every spell leaves a taste in the air if you know how to look for it. This one reeked, like wiring burnt too hot and the brittle stink of old teeth. The trail led us to a warehouse in the industrial district. It was always a warehouse. Inside, metal tables lined with rusted tools, dark stains across the floor, ritual chalk scrawled over cracked concrete. A surgical slab stood at the center, fitted with straps and dried blood pooled beneath it. A faint hum echoed from the walls, magic residue trying to unstick itself from time. Someone had been dissecting hunters and testing on live ones. One of them was still there. He sat slumped against the wall, barely recognizable as a human. His mouth had been fused shut, his eyes torn or carved out. His skin glowed with sigils etched directly into muscle, some still pulsing under the low light. He trembled as we approached. "It's okay," Ren whispered, stepping forward. "We're here to help." The man tried to speak. His throat convulsed. Blood bubbled out from his ears, thick and black. And just like that, he exploded. Not in fire or flesh, but magic. A burst of raw, unbalanced energy surged outward, wild and screaming. I moved without thinking, shoving Ren hard across the room. My glove sizzled, the heat of it nearly taking my hand. Mara reacted faster. She flung up a ward, sharp, angular, desperate. The air howled, and her fingers began to bleed as the lines flared to life. The light faded. What remained was silence. No body, just black scorch marks on the walls. "Fail-safe," Mara said softly. "Who the hell does that?" Ren shouted, his voice cracked at the last word. I didn't answer. I was looking at the table. Carved into the steel, etched deep with a burning brand, was a symbol. A sun, hollowed out. "They're experimenting on corpses?" Keen's voice came through the comms, warped by static. "They're experimenting on us," I said. There was a pause. Too long. Very careful. Then, "Do not escalate. Gather intel. Avoid confrontation." "Too late," I muttered, and killed the line. We swept the warehouse. Standard search pattern, no words, no commentary. No one needed to say anything. The air said enough. We found charts, files, ritual designs, lab notes with bureau clearance stamps that had been blacked out and redacted by hand. Bone fragments cataloged like museum exhibits, and then we found photos. Dozens of them. Headshots, bureau personnel, full dossiers. Some had been crossed out, some were marked with testing codes. Half of them were still alive. And Wren was in the stack. We torched the place, standard protocol. No traces, no samples left behind. Fire eats everything eventually. The ride back was quiet. Mara sat in the back, staring out the window. Her posture was stiff and unreadable, but her hand, resting on her thigh, trembled every few seconds. You okay?" I asked, not turning around. She didn't answer. Later, behind HQ, while the storm rolled in and Wren emptied his guts into a drain, she finally spoke. "They're trying to cheat the rules." "The Hollow Sun?" She nodded. "It's like they think the damage magic does to humans is optional. That if they steal enough flesh, enough history maybe, they can bypass the cost." "They're wrong," I said. "No," she said quietly. "They're right. Just not in a way they'll survive." Wren didn't sleep again that night. Neither did I. This wasn't reckless magic anymore. This was a plan. A system. The Hollow Sun wasn't just scavenging, they were building. Ames filed a report. It went up the chain and vanished. And that's what happens. They'll pretend it's nothing, say it's contained, say we're overreacting. Then they'll keep assigning us field work until we come back with too many missing pieces to complain. Meanwhile, someone, somewhere, is boiling hunter bones in a backroom altar, trying to make something new. Something like us, but better. Or worse. Probably both. The call came from a sanctuary house downtown, one of the quiet ones, not bureau-run, not officially. Places like that are meant to be safe within the margins, tucked away in alleys and protection spells, where demi-humans lay low between contracts, or agents recover from something unnameable. 6 residents went missing overnight. No alarms, no signs of struggle, no spell residue, just empty beds and half-eaten meals. We'd seen enough to recognize it for what it was. Not a monster, not an accident. Intent. Cold and clean. A surgical hit. The Hollow Sun's M.O. We were halfway through the paperwork from the bone case when the call came through. Wren, ever hopeful, asked if we could grab lunch first. Mara didn't answer, so I replied instead. "Nope." The sanctuary house was 4 floors of creaking wood and worn magic. Glyphs stitched into the drywall pulsed faintly with protective charm work, exhausted but still loyal. The air smelled like old wax, burnt coffee, and too many sleepless nights. Whoever had done this had bypassed every ward without triggering a single backlash. And that takes practice and a certain kind of intent. The caretaker, a wiry demi-human woman named Liz, met us at the base of the stairs. She had 4 arms and red-rimmed eyes. She wore her grief like armor, tight around her shoulders, held in place with bitterness. "They were my friends," she said as we moved through the narrow halls. "Some of them had just started to stabilize. One of them was finally sleeping without a shield. We thought it was over." "What species?" Mara asked quietly. Liz tensed, bristled. "Not yours," she said. Not like that. They were people." I raised a hand. "We're not here to sort them, just to find them." She exhaled, jaw tight, and pointed to a room with no door, just hanging beads and a tattered curtain. "They were in there last." We stepped through. The air changed. There was a hum, low and buried under the walls like an echo that had nowhere to go. The space remembered what happened, but barely. Mara closed her eyes and extended her hand. Her fingers twitched, brushed against the disturbance like smoke. "They were taken through," she said. "But not to another realm?" Ren asked. Mara opened her eyes. "No," she said. "Somewhere very human." The trail led across the city. It wasn't obvious. No footprints, no glamour residue. But magic leaves fingerprints if you know what to smell for, faint acrid traces that linger like burnt hair and wet stone. We followed the scent across the cracked sidewalks and industrial runoff into the skeleton of an old water treatment plant, long since abandoned. Surveillance spells showed nothing, no aura, no life, no markers, but something was inside and it didn't want to be seen. Inside the building was rust, rot, piping that groaned under its own weight. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead like tired ghosts. Water dripped somewhere too far away to matter. And the smell hit me. It wasn't like blood or a corpse. Burnt plastic. Mara stopped just past the threshold and her jaw tensed. "There's shielding here," she said. "Advanced. Layered in displacement runes and barrier logic." "Bureau trained?" I asked. She nodded once. That narrowed it down to exactly no one we could trust. We found the first body in the filtration chamber. Small, young, a demi-human boy with skin like folded parchment and veins full of something no one could name. His chest was cut open, not torn, thankfully, but opened. His organs were removed. Every incision was exact and intentional, and carved into the rib cage, still glowing, a rune we'd seen before. Ren turned away, gagging. "They're harvesting magical tissue," Mara said flatly. I crouched beside the body, examining the cuts. "This wasn't experimental," I said. "Whoever did this had done it before." Ren stepped back into the room, pale but steady. "There's a door," he said. "Locked, sealed, blood on the handle." We followed. The door wasn't Bureau standard, but the seal etched into the frame was. Mara placed her fingers against it and her eyes darkened. "This is the Hollow Sun." Inside was a lab, not a backroom altar, not a butcher's table, a full-on lab. Clean medical tables, floating canisters pulsing with suspended fluid, surgical arrays wired from magical resonance, rune amplifiers, environmental stabilizers, the works, and cages. 2 survivors, but they weren't human anymore. One had gills forming under her jawline, slick and twitching. The other had iron bark running through his spine, branching across his neck like veins. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their skin pulsed with the magical backlash. They didn't speak, and they just stared. "They're alive," Ren said. "Can we get them out?" "No," Mara said immediately, and he looked at her, stunned. Hurt. "They'll destabilize if we move them. Their bodies were rewritten mid-process. Anything we do could trigger a collapse." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. I pulled the mercy kit from my bag. Ren turned away. "Don't look," I said softly. He didn't. Mara whispered the right, and the air dimmed around us. When the light returned, they were gone. We found notes, stacks of diagrams, surgical sketches, compatibility charts, spell equations, cross-reference with species markers. It was meticulous. One folder was labeled Progression. Inside were photos, step-by-step breakdowns, patient transformations. Each frame was worse than the last. Some wore bureau tags. Some had monster-class IDs, but none had names. At the bottom of the folder was a sigil, burned into the paper, clear as day. A sun, hollowed. We burned the lab. Back at HQ, we filed the call. Keen didn't answer. Instead, we received a single message: "Cease investigation, transfer case to oversight." Oversight means bury it. We didn't respond and we didn't stop. Later, in the locker bay, Mara handed me a vial, glass, sealed, faintly glowing. Spell residue hummed in my hand, not wild and not monstrous. It was controlled. Human. They're refining the process, she said, not just testing anymore. The bone shard inside the vial gleamed faintly under the fluorescence. It pulsed like it remembered how to be alive. Ren sat beside me later, wrapped in a bureau-issued blanket, still shaking. They were just people, he said, trying to get better. Yeah, I said. And someone thought they were better pieces than people. I nodded. That's the game now. The Hollow Sun isn't after chaos. They want control, replacement, attention. They don't want to end the system. It looks like they might want to become it. Build a new world from broken pieces and stitched together flesh. A species capable of surviving the cost of magic, not by resisting it, but by submitting to it, adapting, and transcending. The Bureau still thinks they're rogue civilians, but they're wrong. The Hollow Sun knows how we operate, what we discard, what we leave buried beneath Bureau floors and euphemisms. And now they know how to use it. The first time I met Dr. Caleb Varn, he sewed my left arm back on using a string pulled from a banshee's burial shroud. He didn't charge me extra for the nerve repair, just told me to drink water and not do anything stupid with it for 72 hours. He was one of the good ones. A Bureau-certified surgeon, cleared for high-risk magical trauma. He was quiet and methodical, and the only one who didn't treat hunters like walking liabilities. He never asked questions he didn't want answers to. Never judged the things stitched onto our bodies or the reasons they got there. His hands were steady even when the rest of the world wasn't. So when his name came up in a red-coded memo marked urgent and restricted, I didn't believe it. Thought it was a glitch, a bureaucratic misfire, the kind of mistake machines make when it doesn't understand people. But then bodies started showing up. 3 civilians dead in 1 week. No criminal record, no magical flags, no known affiliations, just people. Normal people who died in impossible ways, and not fast, not clean. Autopsies showed signs of magical healing, regenerated tissue, reinforced bone structures, internal glyph work embedded under muscles like tattoos. Whoever treated them had known what they were doing, at least at first. Then something went wrong. They didn't bleed out or collapse. They unraveled. Their skin peeled like wet parchment. Their bones liquefied and boiled from the inside out. They screamed until they couldn't anymore. One died with their hands clutched around their throat, like they were trying to keep their soul from escaping. The records all trace back to an underground clinic at the edge of Sector 9, technically outside Bureau oversight, technically illegal. The listed owner? Dr. Caleb Varn, missing for 5 days. Keen gave us the green light to investigate. No backup, no oversight, no extraction protocol. If he's alive, Keen said over comms, bring him in. And if he's not? I asked. Do what you're trained for. The clinic was tucked beneath a defunct barber shop whose windows hadn't been cleaned in 5 years. Layers of charm work kept it cloaked. Low-frequency suppression fields, sensory null zones, all bureau-grade but warped into something quieter. It didn't scream hidden so much as forgotten. Inside it was empty. No patients, no staff, just the smell of antiseptic and dried blood. Surgical kits lay half-packed, vials scattered across medical counters, some shattered. The air felt thin, like a room waiting to exhale. Mara moved first, tracing her fingers across the walls. She stopped in the far corner and knelt. There, she said. Sigils, layered deep. Hiding in the wiring? She wiped dust away to reveal a familiar pattern. Tight circles and recursive loops that shimmered faintly when exposed to light. Hollow Sun structure, she said. He didn't steal their work. He joined them. Ren found the recording. It was stored in a crystal orb floating above a pressure plate, preserved with spell binding, shielded against corruption, still warm to the touch. We watched it activate. Caleb Varn's voice came through, rough and tired. Changed. Like something inside it snapped, and he decided the fracture was worth keeping. The Bureau throws away broken agents like tools, he said. Never found a better way. Their flesh remembers. Their blood wants to be more. We can rebuild from the inside, make humans into something that doesn't have to break. He paused and smiled. We don't need monsters. We just need to become them. The image of him flickered in the orb. That face, it's familiar and kind, scarred from years of stitching others back together, was still there, but his collar had slipped. We saw the sigil branded into his neck. A sun, hollowed out. We found him in the sub-level, deep beneath the clinic, where the charm work got heavier and stronger. The air hummed with compression spells and ritual heat. Magic lingered thick to the tongue, like blood and static. He was working on something still alive, a kid, maybe 20s, strapped to a surgical table, body convulsing under the restraints. His skin had turned translucent, veins glowing fairly beneath the surface. And his bones, God's bones, moved on their own, twitching like worms under his flesh. Step away, Mara said, her voice sharp as steel. Varn didn't flinch. He turned, hands coated in blood, and looked directly at me. You of all people should understand, he said calmly. You've had more dead things sewn into you than anyone I know. And he wasn't wrong. The jaw, the hand, the left lung, all the skin and bones, all borrowed, all stitched in after things went wrong. Bits of monsters, pieces of other agents, living extensions of jobs I should have died on. But I paid for it, I said. Didn't lie to anyone about the cost. Varn stepped back from the table. He gestured towards the kid. They knew, he said. They chose this. They wanted to change. I gave them a choice, something the Bureau never does. I've got a choice too, Mara said, her fingers sparked with glyph fire, and Varn smiled. Then choose wisely. He cast first. A lash of black filament, restructured spell code, banned in 3 sectors, tore the ceiling open above us. The spell cracked the concrete like a lightning strike. Ren dove for cover. I took a rib full of burning force and hit the ground hard. Mara moved through the chaos like she was built for it. Her wards flared, sigils burning midair as they collided with Varn's magic. 2 bounced off his skin, a third got absorbed by something grafted into his flesh, a living shield sewn under the dermis, pulsing with mutated charm work. You think I didn't prepare? He shouted, eyes blazing. I made of the best parts. I am the future. I reached into my coat and grabbed a spell that I wasn't supposed to use. A deep curse. One of the ones Ames warned me about. It burned my throat the moment I spoke it, tore open the lining of my mouth, and cracked a tooth, but it hit. Varn stumbled, blood pouring from his nose, but he didn't fall. You're too late, he said, voice wet with pain. I already sent the knowledge out. It's spreading. And then he raised a bloodied hand and snapped his fingers. The kid on the table seized violently, and then detonated. And the explosion didn't necessarily roar, but it ripped, the sound that peeled the world open. The force shattered the floor, threw me across the room. When I came to, I was under rubble, deaf in one ear, lungs seizing. Mara crouched over me, blood streaming from her eyes as she held a protection ward in place with trembling fingers. Her body shook under the weight of it. Ren was dragging her back, arms locked under her shoulders, screaming something I couldn't hear. The air stank of burnt meat. Where Varn had stood, the wall was painted red. But whether or not it was his blood, or the kid's, or just another failed experiment, we didn't know. And we never would. Back at HQ, they labeled it a containment success. No search order, no retrieval, no after-action review. Varn's name was scrubbed from the logs by the morning, his file locked, the clinic flagged non-existent, The civilian labeled unauthorized patients. The Bureau closed the case. Key never spoke of it again. The knowledge, it's still out there, embedded in bone and blood. Whatever Varn had sent was loose, copyable, translatable. We saved no one, we didn't stop the hollow sun, we just made them harder to trace. Ames did the repairs. She was quiet while she worked, scanning the burns, muttering diagnostics I couldn't understand, and finally she sighed. You burned out part of your memory core, she said. Might have singed a few loops. I nodded. Pick what to lose. She didn't smile. I mean, not really. That's not how it works. I don't remember my sister's name anymore. Ren doesn't ask if the Bureau and I are the good guys. Not since this. Mara doesn't speak unless she has to. Her eyes are darker, but not in color. In belief. As for me, I wrote Varn's name into the back of my notebook, right under the list of people I owe and the ones I failed. Just in case I forget him too.